The storm broke over the valley with a violence that shook the old ranch fences, wind driving rain sideways until the meadows became shallow rivers. Out in the wreckage of toppled rails and scattered hay, a mare lay still, her flanks unmoving, her eyes already dimmed. Beside her, a foal struggled into a world that felt more like drowning than birth. His thin legs buckled, his sides heaved, and every breath seemed stolen from the storm itself. Lightning cracked across the sky, showing him small and soaked, trembling against the mud as though the weight of the rain alone might press him back into the earth. From the tree line, 3 shapes appeared, half hidden by shadow. Dogs. They were shepherd mixes, ribs showing, coats tangled by months of living wild. They should have circled the body for hunger, but instead their steps slowed when they saw the fragile, shaking foal. The largest of them approached, nose lowered, ears forward, tail stiff. The foal tried to rise but collapsed again, a broken whimper caught in his throat. The dog gave a low sound, half growl, half call, and the others came closer. One pressed her body along the foal's side, shielding him from the wind. Another licked the mud from his nose, nudging until he managed a thin gasp of air. The smallest curled against his belly, sharing warmth. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the meadow littered with broken branches and waterlogged earth. In the gray light, the foal stood swaying on spindly legs, his head tucked between the shoulders of the dogs. They moved together toward the trees, for bodies of different kind, but already bound by something unspoken. From a ridge above, Cole Winters tightened his grip on his reins and watched in disbelief. He had risen early to mend fences before cattle strayed too far. A man in his 40s, shoulders bent by years of labor and a heart hollowed by loss, Cole had grown accustomed to hardship. Yet nothing prepared him for the sight of a newborn foal marching clumsily after 3 dogs, copying the way they lowered their heads to lap water from a puddle, even pawing the ground with something that looked almost like play. Cole rubbed his brow, thinking the dawn haze might be tricking him. But no, the foal pressed himself close to the dogs, bumping his nose against their coats as though convinced he was one of them. Cole's horse shifted beneath him, snorting, uneasy at the strange sight below. Part of him wanted to ride down at once, to separate the foal, to carry him back to the corral where he might stand a chance of survival. But another part, the quieter, stubborn voice he had long buried, told him to wait. Cole had seen too much death, too many creatures torn from what they loved, and the foal's fragile body leaning into the warmth of the dogs stirred something inside him he wasn't ready to name. He rode along the ridge until the pack slipped into the forest. From a distance, he kept watch as days folded one into the next. The foal began to grow steadier, legs no longer buckling at every step. He learned to crouch before leaping, mimicking the dogs when they sprang after rabbits. He even tried to howl, a broken bray that startled Cole into a laugh he hadn't heard from his own throat in years. Still, unease crept in. Stray dogs could fend for themselves, but a foal was different. Without guidance, he might never grow into his strength. And yet, Cole found himself leaving hay by the clearing's edge, buckets of water set down without a word. Each morning they were empty, paw prints scattered around, hoof prints stamped over them like signatures of gratitude. One evening, as the sun bled low through the pines, Cole dismounted and stepped into the clearing. The dogs stiffened, hackles raised, forming a shield around the foal. But the little one, ears twitching, eyes wide, took an awkward step forward. Cole crouched, lowering himself until the earth dampened his knees. He whispered softly, the words meant for no one but himself. "You ain't no dog, boy. But you ain't alone neither." The foal's nostrils flared. For a long moment, silence stretched, broken only by the wind moving through the trees. Then the foal pressed his nose against one of the dogs and turned away, retreating into the safety of his odd family. Cole let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That night, as stars spread across the dark, a pair of voices carried faintly from the ridge above. Hunters, passing by, muttered about a wild prize they'd seen trailing the woods. Cole froze where he sat by his dying fire, heart clenched tight. The valley had little mercy for the different, and men with rifles had even less. He looked toward the line of trees where the foal and his strange protectors slept, and something hardened in his chest. Whatever came next, he knew this story was no longer theirs alone. It was his too. The days that followed stitched themselves into a strange rhythm, and Cole found himself drawn more often to the clearing than to his own chores. What had begun as curiosity had become something heavier, though he would not admit it aloud. He would ride out at dawn, pretending it was the fences or cattle that needed checking, only to stop at the same ridge where the foal and his 3 guardians played in the gray light. The sight never failed to catch him off guard. The young Mustang bounding awkwardly through the grass, his spindly legs tangling, his throat releasing a noise that was neither whinny nor bark, but some odd combination of both. The dogs accepted him wholly, without hesitation. They circled him with the ease of littermates, snapping gently at his ears, nudging him into motion when he stumbled, curling against him when night pressed and cold. And Scout, Cole had begun calling him that, though the name had not yet been spoken aloud, believed in their way of life with unwavering certainty. He crouched before leaping, paws that weren't there mimicked in every move. He lowered his head to the creek and splashed water rather than sipping neatly, delighting in the mess. Once, when coyotes howled on the far ridge, the foal threw his head back and loosed a broken cry in response, half bray and half howl, his voice carried ragged into the night. Cole shook his head more often than he smiled, but still he brought hay and buckets. Still he whispered across the clearing, testing the name on his tongue when no one could hear. Scout! The sound of it stirred something old and fragile, something Cole had buried deep when loss hollowed his world. The foal lifted his ears at the whisper, though whether from recognition or mere chance, Cole couldn't decide. One evening, as twilight poured shadows across the meadow, Cole ventured closer than before. His boots sank into damp earth, and the dogs rose at once, hackles sharp, teeth bared in warning. Cole stopped, raising his palms. "Easy," he murmured, voice low, the way he used to speak to colts fresh from the wild. The foal hesitated, then stepped forward with clumsy courage. He pressed his muzzle against the largest dog's flank, as if reminding himself where safety lay, and then he took another small step toward Cole. Cole's heart beat loud in his ears. He crouched, arm outstretched, every motion measured. The foal drew close enough for his warm breath to ghost over Cole's fingers. For the briefest moment, Cole thought the gap between them would close. Then the youngest dog barked sharply, breaking the spell. The foal bolted, crashing back into the trees with his protectors at his side. Cole exhaled, long and weary, but a smile tugged at his lips all the same. They were learning each other, step by halting step. The forest, however, was not a sanctuary. Signs of men crept closer, boot prints in the mud, a snare left cruelly near the creek. Cole knew the hunters were circling, their greed sharpened by rumor of a wild foal with strange habits. He prayed the dogs would keep their distance, but prayers did little against hunger or cruelty. The truth arrived one afternoon in the form of a cry that split the valley. Cole dropped his tools and ran, crashing through brush until he reached the creekside. One of the dogs lay caught in a steel trap, her leg twisted, her eyes wild with pain. The foal stood frantic beside her, hooves striking the earth, a shrill sound tearing from his throat. He bit at the trap, struck at it, his body shaking with desperation. The other dogs snarled uselessly, their teeth against iron. Cole fell to his knees, his hands steady though his chest roared with fury. "Hold on, girl," he whispered, working the trap with all the strength left in him. The metal gave way with a jolt, and the dogs scrambled free, limping but alive. She licked Cole's wrist once before collapsing against the foal's flank. Scout nosed her, whickering low, then turned those wide eyes on Cole. For the first time, there was no fear in them, only trust, only a silent plea. Cole reached out and brushed his hand against the foal's damp cheek. The dogs did not move to stop him. The contact lasted only a heartbeat, but it carried the weight of something unspoken, something binding. As dusk closed in, Cole knew the valley's dangers were growing sharper. The foal had chosen to live as a dog, but men would not see the miracle. Only a prize to be claimed. Carrying the injured dog in his arms, he glanced back at Scout, who followed close behind with the others. The decision was no longer distant. The odd little family would not survive alone. Cole's ranch, empty and silent for too long, would soon find itself full again, and somewhere deep within him, a long-buried ache began to stir with cautious hope, as though the storm that had hollowed his life was finally beginning to break. Cole's ranch had not known such noise in years. Once a place of silence broken only by wind moving through brittle boards, it now carried the shuffle of paws and the uneven rhythm of hooves. Scout and the dogs claimed the porch as their den, curling together in a tangle that left Cole shaking his head each morning. They followed him when he moved through chores, the foal awkwardly weaving between his legs as though convinced he was no different from the pack that shadowed him. Chickens scattered in alarm, barrels were overturned, and twice Scout managed to nose open the kitchen door, sending flour across the floor in a storm of white. Cole muttered curses, but could never quite summon true anger. For the first time in a long while, the place felt alive. Training, however, was another matter. Cole knew the foal's body would soon outgrow the fragile innocence of play. If he was to survive, he needed the handling that would make him safe. So Cole began each day with halter and rope, his hands steady, his voice low. Scout resisted at every turn. He pressed into the dogs when Cole approached, shaking his head, pawing the ground. When Cole tried to brush him, he sidestepped with a stubbornness that reminded the man too much of himself. The dogs circled protectively, and more than once Cole dropped the rope, afraid of breaking the fragile trust he had begun to earn. Late one evening, with the sun bleeding out behind the hills, Cole leaned against the corral rail and spoke aloud though no one was near enough to answer. "I ain't trying to change you, boy. I just don't want to lose you." His voice caught on the last word, and his hand closed tight around the rope. Scout stood just beyond reach, ears flicking, eyes dark with some unreadable depth. Then, slowly, he lowered his head until his muzzle brushed the rail. Cole lifted his palm and let the contact linger, fragile and brief, but real. Word of the strange Mustang spread quickly through the valley. A creature raised by dogs was a curiosity too tempting to ignore. Some laughed, others whispered about luck or omen, but one man saw opportunity. Mr. Hale, a rancher with wealth enough to buy whatever caught his fancy, appeared at Cole's gate one afternoon. He leaned on his polished saddle, eyes sharp, voice heavy with mockery. "Heard you've got yourself a dog that looks like a horse," he drawled. "Figure I'll take him off your hands before someone else does." Cole bristled. "He ain't for sale." Hale's smile was thin. "You think you can keep him safe? Hunters will get bold, or neighbors will. Animals like that don't belong to anyone. They get taken." He let the words hang, then tipped his hat and rode away. Dust settled where his horse had been, leaving Cole with a sour taste in his mouth. Nights grew restless. Cole kept lanterns burning longer, listening for sounds in the dark. The dogs sensed it too, pacing the porch, growls low in their throats. Scout stood watch with them, head high, though his body trembled at every crack of a branch. He wanted to be brave like his pack, but his youth betrayed him. The test came swift and cruel. A storm rolled in, rattling the rafters, and the dogs bolted after some scent into the woods. Scout followed, his thin whinny breaking through the thunder. Cole grabbed his coat and lamp, forcing his boots through mud as he tracked the sound. Branches whipped his face, rain stung his eyes, but he pushed onward. At the edge of a clearing, lantern light caught figures moving. Hunters, rope in hand, rifles slung across their shoulders. And there in the center, cornered against the trees, stood Scout. The dogs circled him, teeth bared, but fear flickered in their eyes. Hale was among the men, his smile colder in the stormlight. "Told you he'd be taken," he said when he spotted Cole at the tree line. "Best you step aside. A freak like that deserves a proper owner." Cole's grip tightened on the lantern handle. He stepped forward, boots sinking into sodden ground, heart hammering against his ribs. Behind Hale, the rope swung like a noose waiting to fall. In Scout's eyes, wide and pleading, Cole saw not just a foal confused about who he was, but a soul asking where he belonged. The storm roared around them, and Cole knew the moment for silence had passed. Rain slashed across the clearing, turning the ground to a mirror of mud and water. The hunters stood poised, ropes drawn, eyes glinting with greed. Scout trembled but did not retreat. His thin chest rose and fell like a bellows, his ears pinned, his small body shielding the limping dog beside him. The pack's growls rolled low, but the men only laughed, their boots squelching closer. Hale sat tall in his saddle, hatch shadowing his eyes, the rope in his fist swinging slow and deliberate. "Step aside, Winters," he called, voice cutting through the storm. "That thing ain't a horse. It's a circus act, and I intend to own it." Cole tightened his grip on the lantern until the glass threatened to shatter. He moved into the clearing, his boots sinking deep, his shoulders squared against men who had always seen him as broken, useless, a relic of a past that had left him hollow. His voice was steady when it left him. "He belongs to no one but himself, and you'll not lay a hand on him." The words carried into silence, punctuated only by the thunder above. One hunter spat in the dirt, shifting his rifle. Hale smirked, as though he had expected nothing less. "Then you'll be trampled with him." The rope arced through the air, cutting toward the foal. Before it could land, the dogs lunged. They struck with the ferocity of wolves, snapping at boots and reins, scattering the hunters' formation. Horses reared, men cursed, rifles clattered to the mud. And in that chaos, Scout surged forward. He no longer looked like a foal mimicking his pack. He lowered his head, his body snapping with instinct older than memory, and he charged. His hooves struck the ground with a force that belonged not to a pup but to a Mustang. Hale was thrown from his saddle as Scout barreled past, the rope slipping from his hand, his body crashing into the mud with a howl of rage. Cole moved fast, swinging the lantern wide. Its light flared across startled faces, and for a moment, the storm itself seemed to hesitate. "Leave," Cole growled, his voice iron in the rain. "This valley ain't yours to claim." The hunters faltered, beaten back by the dogs and the foal who had fought as both beast and brother. One by one, they melted into the trees, Hale cursing, his threats drowned by thunder. When the last echo of their steps faded, the clearing fell still. Scout stood panting, his sides heaving, the dogs pressed close against him. Cole crossed the space slowly, lowering the lantern until its light no longer burned so fierce. He reached for the foal, expecting him to flinch to run. But Scout lifted his head and leaned into Cole's chest, mud-streaked muzzle pressing against the man's worn coat. The dogs circled them both, tails wagging despite exhaustion, as though sealing the bond with their presence. They returned to the ranch by dawn, the storm trailing into silence behind them. The corral, once a place Cole could not bear to enter, became Scout's shelter. The foal allowed the brush across his coat now. The halter slipped over his head, the rope guiding him not as restraint, but as connection. The dogs lay along the fence line, watchful, content. Cole worked slowly, never forcing, letting Scout's trust grow the way roots take to soil. Quiet, unseen, but unshakable. Neighbors came, curious, their whispers carrying disbelief and wonder. Some called it a miracle, others a folly, but Cole paid them no mind. He had seen what they had not. A creature who had learned loyalty in the company of dogs, who had found strength in strangeness, and who had shown him that family is not defined by kind but by care. One evening, as the sun lowered gold across the valley, Cole sat on the porch. The dogs dozed at his feet, Scout resting nearby, long legs folded, eyes half closed in peace. Cole's hand tightened around the cracked lantern he had carried through the storm, and he lifted his gaze toward the horizon. "You'd have loved him, son," he whispered into the quiet. The foal's ears flicked, and he raised his head as though answering, eyes reflecting the last light of day. Cole leaned back, his heart no longer hollow, the silence around the ranch no longer empty. The storm had broken, and in its place something new had taken root. A family forged from loss and loyalty, from defiance and belonging. Scout was no longer just a foal who thought he was a dog. He was proof that what is broken can be remade, and that love, once found, can rise in the unlikeliest of forms.